Thanks, Ashley. Well, we're up to, we're still growing our attendees this evening. So I won't kick off straight away. I'm Andrew Lane, NPA Chairman. I'm going to host and chair this evening. And I think we've got probably the attendees joining is probably stabilized. I think probably everyone's on there who's going to be on at this point in time, and obviously we will welcome more people as they come in, and Ashley will let those in. As Ashley mentioned, it is being recorded. We've got some speakers this evening who are going to be talking about, is your nomination growth telling the full story? And Real World Analytics, you've got Adele Curran from Real World Analytics. She's going to be available for questioning, as we all are. But what we call the real-time end users that we've got this evening. We've got Sharon Waghorn at Acker's Chemist. We've got Carl Chapman at Acker's Chemist. So Sharon is the general manager, a position which he's held since 2017. Carl, he's had various roles within the pharmacy sector since 2005, ranging from dispensary assistant to branch manager onto IT and operations manager at Acker's Chemist. So we've got two of the Acker's people. Irfan Fazal at My Local Chemist, well, director and superintendent of My Local Chemist Group, family run independent pharmacy group with 10 pharmacies, and got one of the largest dispensing community pharmacies in the country. He's going to be telling us how they moved from 40,000 items a month to 90,000 items a month in one of their busiest pharmacies. Adele, like I said, from Real World Analytics, is a seasoned retail pharmacy professional with over 25 years experience of working in head office roles. Adele is the Chief Customer Officer at Real World Analytics for the pharmacy sector in Ireland and in the UK. Previously, she worked in head office at Heaton's department stores for 15 years and fulfilled roles in buying, supply chain, IT, support and training, as well as project management. So very accomplished and obviously a real good expert around what she now does with Real World Analytics. So the evening really is going to be, I'll obviously ask the panel questions just to tease out how they've been using the data. We're going to obviously take a bit of a sort of look at the basic data that you get with your NPA membership, and also how you might be able to then extend and buy the additional add-ons for that data. And perhaps the panelists will tell you what you're probably missing around the nominations and how the data that you first see maybe isn't the data you think it is. So I suppose without further ado, I'm going to open by asking Sharon, obviously we've had a chat before we got on air, and it'd be really interesting if you can repeat some of what you described to me earlier around how Ackers has used Real World Analytics data to develop the business, to help the business, particularly on the professional side, and how it guides your sort of strategies, really. And obviously, I'm sure if you and Carl want to do a bit of a double act on it, I'm sure the audience won't mind.
Well, for me, good evening, everyone. For me, I suppose that the idea of having this data, especially during the COVID year, was I can sit in one remote spot and see how my pharmacies are doing right across the board. I have Carl, my IT manager, who can utilize that data and feed back to me how we're doing in all of the branches. And for me, we initially concentrated on losses. Where are we losing? Where could we do better? And we looked at NMS, and we looked at the reports that RWA provide, so we could see how many potentially we could have had and how many were actually securing. We looked at the delivery service and making sure that we could make sure that we could identify the patients that were shielding and could have a COVID related delivery service. And I was able to utilize Carl's knowledge of the computer system, which I'm not very good at, Carl will tell you, to explore that data. Now, normally I know Carl would have spent hours trying to extract that data from our PMR And the great thing about RWA was we were able to do that in a really fast, and Carl will tell you that just taking that data from the reports enabled us to make sure we weren't making any losses. Our unclaimed prescriptions was a big deal for us, and we utilize that every single day to make sure there's nothing sitting there that's going to go out and expire. I mean, Carl can tell you the sort of reports and how quick it is from an IT point of view to utilize this data.
Yeah, I mean, the data that we get from real worlds, it has saved me hours. Like we were saying before, anyone that's used Pharmacy Manager before the reports that you can take from there. It takes time. It is time consuming to get some of the data that you need. Real world enables me to do that in seconds. Especially with, like Sharon said, the unclaimed script side of things. You not only you've got the prescription IDs that we use, and I can put them straight into the PMR system. We got prices of how much they're worth, and it gives you. I can go straight to the branches and say, these are the ones, they're going to expire, they're expensive, and we need to work on these ones. And it saved me hours.
It's very much a targeted sort of approach, really. So it avoids you, like you said, sort of fishing through individual prescriptions and working out what you're losing. You're really targeting your time and effort, really, I suppose.
Exactly. Yeah.
And saving money, of course, Sharon, is what you've just described, which is
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And at the moment, and all the time, I suppose, in pharmacy, but more critically at the moment, we're so challenged financially to make sure we're not having any unnecessary losses. It's always sitting in the back of your mind, and now we can see it. Now we can see it and do something about it so easily, and it's really reassuring, actually.
Great. And Irfan, coming to you now. So you presumably have similar experiences of using the data. Do you want to describe maybe how it's supported your group and how you're taking it forward? And then we can maybe come to Adele, who will put some examples up on the screen of the reports and maybe demonstrate, what you're about to tell us.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, I mean, I'd echo the exact same stuff as Sharon and Carl. We use data in very, very similar ways. I think for us, initially one of the biggest losses we were having were switched prescriptions where, the PMR exemption might be that the patient's exempt, but for some reason the script has gone through as a paid script and we wouldn't know that's happening. So we were able to get the data to know, okay, well, which scripts do we need to change the exemption on? And, each script that you do that for, that's £9 that you're saving. So that was a massive thing for us. I think more so during the pandemic, I think real world analytics has been a lifesaver for me. I mean, I used to travel a lot to visit our branches, and during the pandemic, it enabled me to manage a lot of stuff remotely because the data is all there. So you can have those effective conversations with your branch managers to understand really what's going on in each branch. I think one example is that, as Sharon's mentioned, is the pandemic delivery service. When that was announced, initially it was like, well, how are we going to identify all of these patients easily? And within a few days, Adele was able to put together, a report, a targeted report of patients who we think are eligible. And so rather than having to look through thousands of patients, you were left with a few, maybe 100 or 200 patients per branch, which saved a lot of time for our branches. And, and therefore we were able to claim the money a lot easier for the pandemic delivery service. So yeah, I'd say, similar sorts of things with the expiring prescriptions, being able to have the exact codes of the prescriptions and say, and, being able to send the codes to the branch managers and say, these are the codes that you need to look at. There's issues with them, whether it be, needs to be claimed, whether it needs to be the exemption. And then, again, same as what Sharon has mentioned on the NMS service, prior to having real world analytics, most of our branches were not doing a lot of NMS, and having the daily reports and being able to identify the patients a lot easier and having that data has helped us achieve much better NMS numbers, especially with the MURs now going. NMS is so much more important now, so we're now in a position where most of our branches are doing consistently hitting their NMS targets.
And presumably, obviously PMR systems nowadays can do a lot of this, but from what you're describing, you've just got down into that extra granular detail, which gives you the ability to save a lot of time and effort without having to data trawl through the PMR system yourself. I think that's what I'm hearing, is it?
Yeah, exactly. I think, you know, using the PMRs are great for labeling and doing this, the sort of operational stuff. But from the data perspective and from a head office perspective, it is hard to amalgamate all the data for the different branches and get that data. So, you know, real world analytics has helped us to get that data that much faster and in the right format. You know, it's all very well having the data, but it's got to be in a user-friendly format that, you know, I can understand, and also branch managers and actually even dispensers can understand as well.
You'll sympathise, Sharon, with some of that, and Carl as well too, I suspect, will you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
It is, and it enables us to, the branches now know that we're focused on this, which means they have to equally be focused. So yeah, it's quite a nice tool.
Sharon is watching.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so Adele, obviously, you know, you've heard of how it's benefiting real time, you know, real world analytics benefiting in real time, I suppose. You know, you're probably going to now describe on screen some of the screenshots that you've prepared and describe how maybe some of what Sharon and Irfan and Carl have described is helping them in their branches, and how others can perhaps benefit from going that extra step and looking at the granular detail that they've just described. Is that right? Are you happy to do that, Adele?
Yeah. So I thanks guys for all the good words there. It was great. I suppose what I want to look at with you guys is firstly the just having a quick cover off of the current dashboard that we send out in association with the NPA to their members every month. And I just want to show you, you know, when you look at a summary level of information, whether it be about your items, whether it be about your nominations, whether it be about your digital, that there is always another layer underneath it that you don't see. And those are the layers that is there's either risk there or there's potential there. And I just want to go through and just show you a couple of sample reports that will give you an idea of additional pieces of information that on top or underneath the summary that you currently get that will help you to drive your business. As an independent pharmacist, you'll get to know what's going on in your local area, your local surgeries, your local competitors, and just to give you an idea of what that looks like and how that can add value. And Irfan and Sharon will testify to that really does add serious value. I'm just going to try and share my screen now without breaking it. Just bear with me 1 second. There we go. Okay. So I won't dwell on this because I know as members of the NPA, you guys get this every month, so you actually have seen this before. But what we're looking at here is just the summary of how we did for the last month that we got paid. In February 21, this was the number of items. This particular branch, it was a sample branch from Boots. So we looked at it and went, okay, so the branch was 2.7% up year on year. That looks like they were doing really well. The local growth for that branch is 2.6. So they were above the local area, but the industry growth was down 3.1. So they were above the industry as well. In the 6 months they were up. They were down in 12 months, but it really looks like they're pulling it back. So this branch looks like on a whole that they're doing quite well. If we look at the digital, the EPS, they're at 91.6. The industry average is at 95. So they might need to up their game in terms of EPS prescriptions. The local area average is at 94.6 as well. So I'm only at 91. So that needs a little bit of a push. Nominations looks great. I'm up 5.7% in the last 3 months of my nominations. I'm up 5.7. The local area is down -1. And the industry average is up 2.4. So actually I'm way above the average in my nominations. So that all looks like it's telling me a very good story. When I move down and look at the surgeries, then I can see that in the dispensing surgeries, they're down 2.7% year on year in February. My top practice though, for this Boots branch is up 19.2%. And the other practices are up down 6.2%. So that looks like to me that my top practice I'm not sure how much I'm getting from those, but they're up quite substantially. So I should be getting good growth there as well. And then at the bottom here, we're looking at our services. The MURs will disappear after next month because they're finished, but and then the NMS. So my average NMS is 7. I did 28% of my monthly target. So I've got a good bit to do here, but the industry average is 9. So, you know, the local average of NMS is 18. So there's somebody else out there in my local area that's doing more than I am. It's a good summary. It tells you a good bit about the local area. It tells you what the industry is doing. But when I want to look down and go, well, actually, who is that in my local area that's doing more NMS than me? Who is getting all the increases from this top practice? Who are the other practices? So this is the more detailed level of these reports that are available to upsell through the NPA. You'll see the top part of it here shows me. I'm the guy in purple there in the middle, and the rest of my competitors are the good guys in grey around. We then split each of those competitors down to look at their rolling year, their latest month growth, and what their digital looks like. Big ones here then are looking at trend lines to see, you know, are the trend lines going in the same direction for me and for my neighbors? Or if they're not going in the same direction, am I doing better than the others? So you can see here in the nominations, the trend is that we're all going up. So using nominations only as a checkpoint on growth is probably not the best thing to do because everybody's growing nominations. The next one then is, where are the items coming from? So that little purple dot is me, and the X's around it are the surgeries that give me items. So these are my top 10. So 24% of my items come from this Malling Health Great Bridge Centre here. My growth there is 2.7% and 5.4%. The one beneath it is giving us 12% of our items come from there, but my item growth there is down 8% and down 6%. Big question here, when I look at the total items, this Malling Health Great Health looks good. Their growth is a lot higher than mine, so where's the extra growth going to? But the second one, they're up and I'm down. So although my overall picture looks good, my items for that month were up. Here's a hidden piece of information here or insight that we haven't seen before. The next thing then is, I suppose, well, let's have a look at those surgeries in more detail and see who's growing and falling, who's the winners and who's the losers. So if we look at this one, we can see that, again, I'm the purple guy here. That's me. I'm doing well, but this Sandwell one here is doing better. This Asda pharmacy here is doing terrible, but you know, we're not worried about that. I'm more worried about the Sandwell pharmacy or the Great Bridge pharmacy there. And then down here, we can see that this Express Pharmacy Services in Spring Road is getting a massive increase from this surgery. And we're all, the rest of us in the area are all losing from it, with the exception of Pharmacy to You and Echo. So, you know, what's causing that? Who's doing what in that surgery that's impacting our growth? We can look down at the lower ones. There's the full top 5 in it. And then the last page is looking at your services. So we're looking at MURs till next month. We're looking at NMS claims for you and all of your surrounding areas. So I can see who is that branches that are causing the average area to be 18. It looks like it's Sidhu's up here. They're doing 80 NMS in the last month. The New Street one did 32. The Day Lewis one did 36. So I have a good bit of scope to actually do more NMS there. The COVID deliveries is in there as well. And then in the next few months, once we get the data in, we'll start being able to look at DMRs and CPCS as well. So that again gives you a better scope on how many NMS there is there available for you to do. So that is a random boots branch report. I'm just going to show you 2 reports. This one is one that
Adele, I'm just thinking,
yes.
Before you move on that last report, I mean,
yes.
there was some amazing data there. You know, that granular data tells you an awful lot. just interestingly, if you looked at the Echo, they've come from a standing start. Those growth figures on Echo were quite staggering. But also, if you looked at Sidhu's pharmacy, you looked at the pandemic delivery numbers, they were immense. 7,000 deliveries, incredible. COVID deliveries, incredible. And you looked at, there's only one other pharmacy that was really there, New Street, doing what looked like a big amount, but not compared to Sidhu's. So it is incredible how it absolutely describes what's happening in your locality, right down to that granular data. It's incredible.
Exactly. Yeah, it does, and it opens your eyes and possibly opens windows and doors as well. To approach either different surgeries, to be able to see different things, to get a good scope on. When we started doing pharmacy BI originally, when we started building the NMS modules, we got a lot of pushback from our customers saying the pharmacy said that they can't do NMS, that there's no NMS opportunity coming in the door. And as part of data, we're able to identify on a daily basis who walked through the door yesterday that should have had NMS. But this gives you a clearer picture as well, that there's plenty of NMS. There's NMS in its 80s and its 30s in the other branches in this area, but we're just not doing them. So we're not utilizing the opportunity that's there. There's no way that just the patients that are going into these other pharmacies have NMS and nobody coming into yours has it.
Yeah, and I think as well, obviously, the large corporates have their own data analysis. This really just puts the independent sector on an equal footing to the corporate sector, because this data is so rich. And, you can get, as you've just described, and certainly as Carl and Sharon and Irfan have described, you can get into the detail and make business decisions very, very quickly, and being able to turn around your business very quickly based on the information that's in front of you. It is really good.
Yeah, well, I suppose the main thing, most pharmacy owners look at and they track on a weekly and a monthly basis is items and nominations. That seems to be the big thing out there. And I suppose it's just when you have this extra level of data, it allows you to see more than just the items and the nominations. It allows you to see, as we said, potential and risk. So the more data you have, the more data you've got access to, the more beneficial it will be for you.
Yeah, fantastic.
So this one then, a very similar picture on the front level. We've got a Dis Pharma, my local chemist branch, who is growing and has been growing over the last 12 months. My digital is at 96.4%, which is above the industry average. My nominations growth, again, is above the industry average at 2.9. The industry is at 2.4, and the local area is at 1.6. So this all looks really positive. But here it looks like we've got a bit of a problem. We've got lots of red numbers around our surgeries. It's seeing it here and then actually being able to see more detail about it is probably the bottom line. And then here we've got MURs and we've got NMS. So I'm just going to ask Irfan here, if you don't mind, Irfan, just in terms of looking into this report further, into the lower level of detail, where do you go to, and is it as I would be looking at directly to who's the surgery is doing, or what are the other companies doing, or what would be your next steps when you got a report like this?
So I think looking at the screen that you've got up there, I'd be looking at sort of how are the other competitors doing, because obviously if we're growing 4%, in the last month, 12 months growth is 3%, are the other pharmacies in the local area, how are they doing? And you can see, there is another pharmacy, Dixon's Green, who've got 500% growth. So that would be an immediate sort of cause for concern for me. Then looking at the other local branches, you can see a lot of them are actually not doing so well. So -5% for the Boots, Murray's -4. So you can see that the local competitors you know, it's a mixed bag. You can see some are doing really well, some are not. So I tend to look at the 6 month and the 12 month growth rather than the latest months, because obviously items vary from months to months, you know, quite a lot. So I tend to look at the 6 and 12 months figures, because that gives you a sort of better picture of what's going on.
Yeah, definitely a good way to go.
Then, you know, just looking at where the items, you know, where the top 10 practices, I think this is where sort of the key information is. So you can see Bean Medical Practice, which is actually next door to the pharmacy, you know, my latest 3 months growth and 6 months growth is -3% for both those for both those periods. And that surgery is next door to us. So that's, you know, despite the items growing, we're actually losing items, you know, from that particular practice. And actually our growth is coming from our second biggest practice, which is Central Clinic. So, you know, that presents to me an opportunity is, okay, yes, you know, if you see the growth from Central Clinic, that's 10-12%, but that growth is kind of been sort of not as strong because of the sort of the fall in items from the other surgery, which is an opportunity. Then you look at, okay, well, where are the items going from this particular surgery? You know, is there something, you know, going on? And you can see there's quite a big increase in Bradley Chemist. Pharmacy to You has an increase, Echo has an increase, but at the same time, you know, Pharmacy to You and Echo, it's only sort of 800 and 100 items in the year, which isn't a massive amount to sort of be, I mean, it's still obviously growing quite fast, but it's not, that's not where the items are going. So, you know, you can see that there is, you know, there's a, you know, Bradley Chemist is where there's quite a lot of items, there's some items going. But I think the other thing, I think further up in the data, it shows that the practice is also down in their items. I think it, here.
Yeah.
So you can see here in the last 3 months and 6 months that all the practices in the local area are down. But if you compare Bean Medical Practice compared to the other practice, Central Clinic, their sort of items are down much more than the other practice. So is there something going on in that practice? You know, that's a conversation that the pharmacist can have with the practice manager or the doctor. You know, are they not seeing as many patients at the moment? Was the appointment availability? And I think that's the key thing that we've seen throughout the pandemic is, you know, we get, I don't know if all the rest of you find the same thing, patients saying they're not able to get with a doctor's appointment, and therefore, you know, that potential 5%, you know, loss of items could be acute items, which from patients not being able to see their GP or patients not being as ill throughout the pandemic, you know, that could have contributed to that sort of loss of items. So yeah, that's the kind of thing that I look at, and it, you know, so whilst it's, you know, initially looking at the data, you see that this branch is doing really well, it's growing. There is still a lot more opportunities to be had. You know, and then looking at from the services side of things, you know, you can see on the NMS, you know, we're doing 10 NMS, which is, you know, around similar sort of levels to a lot of the other pharmacies, but there's Tividale Pharmacy who are doing 24. So, you know, is there further opportunities from there? Again, the COVID deliveries, you know, there's, you know, our numbers are lower than the other pharmacies in the area. You know, is there a way we could, you know, at the time, could we have advertised the delivery service more to those shielding patients? So yeah, looking at the data and being able to compare to your competitors gives you a bit of a benchmark on a granular level.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thanks so much, Irfan, for that. Speaking of benchmarks, I just want to flip over to this one. Now, this is like almost real-time data. So we did a benchmark across our 1,100 branches that use our system to have a look at the other hidden insights in the patients at the moment, that most of it very, very positive, a little bit of question marks, but again, possibly potential. And this is what Irfan is talking about, having a benchmarks and having these kind of benchmarks and being able to see how you're doing against your peers or your local area is always very valuable. So we can see here in the rolling year, and this is the rolling COVID year, so this is the full COVID year versus the previous year. we had a 1.2% item increase across our 1,100 branches. That's on the full RWA system. We had 20% nomination growth, but the nomination growth across the industry is around about, I think, about 17 or 18% for local community. This is a good one, and this is a one that people probably aren't seeing very well, this one and this one here. The rolling year items per patient this year is now 26.4, and that's an average. And then the previous rolling year was 22. So we're looking at a 20% item per patient growth. That's a very positive picture coming out of probably a very bad year in COVID, because the nomination growth is driving what I think is more patient compliance. And maybe we can have a chat about that when we have finished looking at this. But the same here, in the previous year, the average patient came in 5.5 times. This year, they're coming in 6.6 times or 6.5 times. So that's a 16% increase in patient visits as well, right? Now, putting that aside, right, so we've got greater items per patient, we've got greater average visits. Hidden in that is the fact that actually our overall patient counts are down year on year. Because our items look fairly stable, the items per patient is not something that we always kind of look at. And the patient visits, again, is not something that we always kind of look at. We potentially could not see that the patients overall are down. And we've got across our, as I said, about 1,100 branches, we've got a 16% decrease in patients year on year. That's a rolling 12 months, 1920 versus 2021. And then on top of that, then you've got, well, probably mostly the cause of it, you've got a 17% decrease in acute prescriptions over that time period as well. So where that looks a little bit daunting, the negativeness, it can be very easily, I think, flipped to being a potential or positive. I think I might just ask the other panel members there, how do they feel about this, and what do they see as, you know, they can do out of this for the future?
Firstly, Adele, before we move on to the panel, I think what's really interesting is that 17% acute year-on-year growth, no, negative percent, is obvious, as you described, that everyone's been wandering around with masks. So if you look at OTC, retail sales were down 47% year-on-year. Because if you look at the traditional season, cough, cold season, we didn't have one because everyone was protected. There was a lot of reduced transmission of average acute bacterial spread. And therefore, because we were all, you know, battened down against the virus, we were also battened down against any other bacterial infections that would usually fly around during the winter period. So as a result, we saw significant reductions in OTC, but also, as you've seen here, in your acute growth. But overall, items, the trend, of course, many surgeries were closed. Therefore, pharmacies in medical centres probably didn't do as well, to the detriment, you know, you've got other pharmacies who are outside of medical centres who've perhaps been doing reasonably well on increasing nominations, using the data, particularly, you know, RWA clients who are using it through the NPA. I don't know, there's some really rich data there. So coming to maybe Sharon and Carl, do you want to describe, you know, were you seeing something like that across your group?
Exactly that. We have, out of our group, we've got 2 medical centre pharmacies. And it was very obvious very quickly that the acutes were having a big impact on the business. It's nice not to have a queue, but that 17%, it was really showing. And it was hard to know, you know, how can we offset that? And when we drilled in and saw the data, and, you know, there was a gut feel, but it's good to see the data to say, yeah, right, you're not seeing these patients in the medical centre pharmacies, but we were picking up in the other pharmacies. There were more people coming in. We had bigger OTC sales in the ones that weren't linked to the medical centres. and that were maybe better positioned in a residential area. So yeah, that is definitely something that we saw across our 2 medical centre pharmacies.
Yeah, and to add to that, I mean, when COVID hit, how many surgeries do we see that, you know, completely locked their doors? That was it, you know. And also, if you were feeling not too great, the likelihood you wasn't going anywhere anyway. You know, people didn't want to venture out. So maybe some of the unnecessary visits where they come away with an acute prescription, we were missing them as well, because, you know, people weren't going out.
So someone who was on the money with the COVID deliveries earlier on, that 7,000 COVID deliveries, they took advantage of that opportunity, I suppose, and that shows through in the data, no doubt.
Well, I thought we were on it with the COVID deliveries until I saw that's 7,000 COVID deliveries, and that was quite a shock. So
yeah. Well, what about Irfan? Again, similar. You seeing similar sort of trends across your group?
Yeah, so we have sort of a split group in terms of we have some health centre pharmacies, some high street pharmacies, and, you know, same things as Sharon mentioned. You know, we in our health centre pharmacies, you know, with the doctor surgeries closing their doors, you know, all those acute items were no longer there. But at the same time, in our high street pharmacies, where there was a medical centre pharmacy attached to the health centre, local health centre, those acutes where before they would go, you know, to the pharmacy just outside the health centre, you know, obviously with all appointments now being over the telephone, you know, the doctor would be like, you know, shall I send it to your nominated pharmacy? So our high street pharmacies were getting those acute items back from the health centre pharmacy. So it kind of was a mixed bag, I guess, you know, in that. But across the board, you know, we did see that there's similar numbers in terms of year-on-year patients are down, and it's probably from, you know, people who probably weren't getting ill, who aren't on regular medication. So those acute patients who you might only see once a year, you haven't seen, you know, since prior to COVID. But also at the same time, it's patients not switching between pharmacies. So where you might get your acutes from your health centre pharmacy, but your repeats from the pharmacy, you know, down the road from you, you know, that compliance that Adele was mentioning, you now would get all your prescriptions from the same pharmacy, whether it's your acutes or your repeats. And that could be impacting on this rolling year items per patient increasing, and number of visits increasing across the group, because you now kind of stick to one pharmacy, even if you have a doctor's appointment, because they send it straight to your nominated pharmacy.
Yeah,
it's really interesting to see those RWA benchmarks, really, Adele, isn't it? And how that sort of describes the year we've had.
It does, yeah. It really does, yeah. I think just going back to the average patient visit, I think one of the really big benefits, I think, of having people nominated and people being more compliant is potentially that elusive 13th dispensing in the year. Because, you know, like a lot of the monthly prescriptions are 28-day, but with non-compliant patients, a lot of the time, most pharmacies don't get that 13th dispensing in the year. So, you know, this might be, and I think with the year-on-year patients, that there is still potential for more nominating of those patients as they come back into the pharmacies. There's, you know, there's opportunity for privates, PGGs maybe. I think Irfan, we were talking about that earlier. So, you know, like there's a lot of potential, I think, still left in that 16% of patients that haven't come back in yet.
No, absolutely. Well, I think in the short time we've got left before we close, Adele, and if the other panelists are happy, we asked for questions to be put in the chat. And I think Connell obviously has asked the question. So should the strategy post-COVID be to focus on holding on to the patient compliance so that when the patient numbers increase due to typical conditions return to the pharmacy, we'll see a significant increase in items? That's a really good point. I mean, do you see the sense in that, Irfan?
Yeah, no, I think that makes complete sense. I think, you do want to hold on to that sort of compliance at the moment. So there's all sorts of ways that people are looking into reminding patients to order their medication, But as Adele was mentioning, looking at sort of the other opportunity with the typical conditions coming back, with general practice sort of closing their doors for the last year and pharmacy having that goodwill, it's about having those conversations with your patients and saying, what, actually, before you go to your doctor, come and see us. We might be able to help you. There's private PGDs now for ear infections, UTIs, lots of acute conditions. So they don't actually need to go see their GP, so they can come to their pharmacy. So I think that's a potential strategy to look at.
Okay, great. And I think we've got obviously not many questions at all, but Sanjay has his hand up. I don't know if Sanjay, do you wanted to actually put your question to the panel through the chat? Just quickly type whatever question, and anybody else out there. I can see a few familiar names, many long-standing NPA members out there. CJ, great to see you from Pharmacy London. And I think Graham Phillips, you're on the line as well. Vicky Furno from York. So, brilliant to see some of the regular NPA members joining this evening. So happy to ask, please ask away. The panel are waiting for any questions that come in. Adele, again, with all the knowledge that she's got on the RWA analytics system, any technical questions, I'm sure won't be too much of a challenge. But it'd be really good to end the evening with one or two taxing questions. But in absence of those taxing questions, I'd like to take this opportunity, obviously, to thank the panelists and Adele for putting this presentation together, really.
So I just have that quick question to ask. Thank you. It was a great presentation and really useful to have the perspective from the pharmacy group owners there. I guess my question is, as pharmacy owners, you have your head office systems that your PMR suppliers provide. So, we have central reporting, etc. And we've been tending to rely on that. So all I wanted to know was, I'm sure you have access to that as well. How is that data different to what you're getting here? And I know this is presented way better and brings it all together, but could you not have got that from your own PMR head office reporting systems?
I think, Irfan, you can maybe answer this one. You might have briefly touched on it earlier, Irfan. If Sanjay, I think Irfan had this very similar sort of situation. Irfan, are you happy to answer that one?
Yeah, no, I am. So there is a lot of the data there in the PMRs, but the issue is getting it out into a sort of an easy format to understand, one. Secondly is automating things. So with real world analytics, all of our emails to branches and the data that are important are emailed automatically to the branches. So I don't have to worry about that. But I think it is a lot about the presentation of data and everybody being able to understand it. So, at a head office level, we might be able to understand the data from central reporting, but being able to present that to the branches in a format they can understand. And the second thing is that just the level of data that you can get from real world analytics is so much more detailed than the PMRs. I think that there's so many more reports, and the other thing is that the team at Real World Analytics are so much more reactive when you ask them, for reports and if there's a certain way you want something presented, or there's a certain issue you have in a branch, they're always willing to help. Whereas I find with the PMR providers, because they have to follow a process for development, it takes them a lot longer to create a report, whereas it's a lot easier for the team at RWA to create reports.
Hopefully,
second that quickly.
Sorry.
Sorry, can I just add to that as well? Completely agree with what Irfan said, but building the level of reports that you get from RWA, even with a decent head office system, you're talking about a full-time job as well. It's not something that you can just nip in, grab a report off, and disappear. If I was to be building reports like that, I wouldn't get any other work done. It would literally just be building report after report. So having, not only does it save time and money, it's just logical to use something like Real World as opposed to putting all that time and effort in to building something that wouldn't be as detailed as what you get anyway.
So hopefully, Sanjay, that's answered your question in great detail. We've got one from Mohammed, and can it work with ProScript Connect? So I don't know, Adele, do you want to answer that one quickly? We'll move. Vicky Furno's got one as well lined up. Can it work with ProScript Connect? Quick.
Absolutely. Yes, definitely.
Yep. Excellent. So Mohammed, I hope you're happy with that one. Vicky, someone earlier mentioned info being available for unclaimed items, and I think that was probably Sharon. And is the data available through these reports, and maybe expensive items split down at surgery level as well?
Yes.
So maybe a bit of Sharon, a bit of Adele. Do you want to do a bit of a double act on that?
Yeah. I suppose just to say that we identify expensive items on a weekly basis or a monthly basis for our customers, so that they can see where the risk is in terms of making sure they're claimed on time. And the unclaimed scripts, you can get that off your PMR, but you can also get it through real world. And as the guy said, it's just a matter of way we have formatted it in the highest risk first, and the direction of the reporting going directly to the branches. It just makes things a lot easier to manage.
Thanks, Adele. And Sharon, you were going to add something?
And I suppose from a user point of view, having that report built in a way where you can see the greatest financial loss first, you can concentrate your efforts. And so if you can just save 10 from expiring, you've saved yourself a lot of revenue loss. So I like using the reports and being able to target the ones that are going to make the most difference.
Thanks, Sharon. I've got one from Nilesh. Can we see which of our nominated patients have moved away? Adele?
No, is the answer to that. It's not actually. We have within our system the ability to identify a patient cycle, and then when the patient has missed their cycle, so an overdue patient. It's not feasible from any of the PMRs to identify that the patient has actually moved the nomination. You can see the nomination is gone, but you've no idea where they're gone to. And I think the NHS had one of the PMRs, I believe, had that option in at one point, and they were asked to take it back out again.
Okay, so hopefully that's answered that question, Nilesh. I know you've got another one coming up, but which is more accurate, Adele, RWA or farm data? That's from Rajiv.
It's the same. It is. We're using the same data set. We're both using publicly available data. I wouldn't say ours is any better than theirs. I suppose the big thing about ours is it is automated. It goes directly to your branches. It goes directly to your head office pack. We create a pack of benchmarking across the whole industry, and it's sent straight to you. Farm data is very good. And as I said, it contains the same data, but you do have to access it yourself.
But the NPA is supporting RWA on this one, so that's hey, Vicky again, and is it compatible with Titan?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
No, so we're integrated with Segedum, with PSL, and with ProScript. So ProScript Connect and AH.
Okay, and Nilesh was talking about subscription fees. So in other words, for the extra, what are we talking about?
So the upsell for the reports through the NPA, I think that is 60 quid a year for the additional reporting. For the DSS system, the decision support, which is the one connected to the PMR, unfortunately, it's only available for groups. But if you are interested as a group member of the NPA, you can email us directly and we'll quote you, because it depends on the size of your group.
And from what Sharon said earlier on, you've saved that £60 just in one expensive item that hasn't gone out of date.
Absolutely, yeah.
Literally, £1,000 injection comes in, Pentasa, whatever it is, and you're absolutely kiboshed. So. Another one, I think, from Vicky up in York. You're doing really well, Vicky, in York. Are you able to break down the nomination losses by age groups?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. So everything is identified by age. So for specific reports, we categorize the segmentation. but so that you get the most relevant information. So yes, the nominations can be broken down by age.
Cool. And probably make this the last question because we need to wrap up because of our Zoom time. Dana, does it work with RxWeb? We've got a lot of PMR compatibility questions. Obviously, I don't think it does it?
It doesn't. We're not integrated with either Titan or RxWeb yet.
Yes. The
Yes.
answer being yet, Dana. So again, yep, obviously, Vicky, thank you very much again. Thank you for all attending, really. I just want to thank the panelists again. It's been great. You know, maybe if everybody, you've got as an attendee, the opportunity, if you scroll down, you've got an opportunity to put a hand up, I think. Do you at the bottom? Does that come up on your screen? If you've enjoyed this evening, give us a blue hand wave. And, you know, we hope to see you on another one of these events in the not too distant future. I just want to thank Ashley at the NPA for doing all the technical stuff behind the scenes, making sure the Zoom works, and you know, we all sort of had our broadband on. And yeah, thanks again, everybody. So lots of blue hands coming up there, and great to see so many loyal NPA members coming on the call. So once again, and thank Connell, obviously, who's one of the attendees, but he's keeping a close eye on proceedings out there, Connell. So again, Adele, thanks for your time, and Sharon, Carl, and Irfan, thanks again.
Thanks, Robert. And just before I finish off, I just remind people that if they're interested in the upgrade of the local insight reports, which is the reports we showed this evening, to contact their NPA representative.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Thanks, you.
Thank you.
Good night, all.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.